And welcome back to the Suppress Herald, the podcast exposing the fact that politics is local and so is propaganda. And the Suppress Herald's up to it again. Our local newspapers here in Maine love to propagandize whenever they get a chance. We've got a couple of doozies today, and it kind of shocks me sometimes the chutzpah that they have, the editorial board at this supposed newspaper to actually print letters, and of course they fall back on the old saying that, well, those are just opinions. Those are just people's opinions. We're just sharing those. But, there's such a thing as opinions. There's also such a thing as blatant BS and lies that play into a narrative that they ultimately, these editorial boards on newspapers and in the media all over, have been putting out. And it's shameful, but it's also very alarming that they continue to use as propaganda their editorial pages and, fall back on, well, it's just somebody's opinion. Here's one that I find is just the most dim-witted, stupid editorial letter maybe ever. And anybody that's paying attention. And this is what we get. And this is in the paper on Friday here in Maine. The silence on Trump's health is deafening. In covering the president's recent visit to Japan, the media came up short. And then this person proceeds to call into question his mental and physical fitness to be president. You know, they, oh, they were, after Biden, and it's now common knowledge. Everybody knows it. Biden was in failing health, mentally, especially, and physically, and really wasn't competent to be president through most of his term. Everybody knows that now. The auto pen was signing everything, and he spent the weekends in Delaware almost every weekend. The guy worked very little. He put a lid on. That became a standard practice, putting the lid on it early afternoon when I guess he had to take naps. The guy didn't do anything. He traveled little. They said he traveled to somewhere just before his horrific performance in the debate with Trump. And oh, they blamed it on he was traveling. Well, to even 1 second suggests that Trump isn't physically and mentally able to do his job as president is the most specious and garbage conversation, even. We shouldn't even be having the conversation. Anybody's been paying attention. The guy is traveling all over the world, literally, changing time zones, flies to the Pacific, goes to Japan, goes to South Korea, Singapore. The guy's all over the place and doing meetings all day and into the evening, doing social events and, events with heads of state. Gets on the plane, flies back, and he's back in the White House and he's taking press conferences and press gaggles and the entire time, no stop. People all around him saying, I can't keep up with this guy. And then he goes out and he plays 18 holes of golf. And the whole notion that he is not physically and mentally able to perform the duty as president is the biggest bunch of garbage ever. And yet, the Suppress Herald, they're okay with throwing this letter in there. That letter, which is nonsense. And the only reason you would do that is to play into a narrative that's propaganda. Basically, what the title of this letter to the editor should say is the propaganda arm of the Suppress Herald here in Maine want to make this point and then put it out there. It's absolutely ridiculous. If you want to go to another one, this is in the Sunday Suppress Herald, and this is another pure, unadulterated propaganda story passing as news. Trump has accused boat crews of being narco terrorists. The truth is more nuanced, okay? More than 60 people have been killed by U.S. strikes since they began in September. These are strikes against narco terrorist boats carrying massive amounts of fentanyl, cocaine, other drugs by criminal, illegal, basically the narco terrorists that Trump has declared terrorists, international terrorists. They have killed hundreds of thousands of Americans with fentanyl. This is no different than if they were coming in with an army and killing people. They're just using drugs. It's also backed by China, who send them all the precursors, which are the chemicals to mix up and create fentanyl. And they are some chemicals required to turn poppies into cocaine. And Trump has said no more. These are terrorists. We are declaring war on that. And they're enemy combatants bringing those drugs to our shores. And he's just saying, we're not going to do this anymore. We're going to blow them up. And they go into this story, a sad, sad story about a Venezuelan who just is a fisherman. He's just a fisherman. And he doesn't make he makes $100 a month or whatever they came up with. And as a fisherman, and he just wanted to buy an outboard motor for a boat so he could be his own fisherman, his own boss. And, so the narco terrorist dangled because he's a fisherman in Venezuela. He knows the waters like the back of his hand, and he could navigate in the dark to get their boat to where it needs to go. And this is just such a sad story about this fisherman. He's a fisherman that knew what was on the boat fully. They dangled money at him, and unfortunately, he was hauling a boatload of drugs, and he was the guy who knew how to do it, and that didn't work out. The U.S. intercepted that boat and blew it out of the water, and he was killed. This is nothing but pure bunk and propaganda trying to, once again, liberals siding with criminals, terrorists, gang members, murderers, rapists, people that are that boatload that poor Juan was bringing to the country, just trying to make a buck so he could buy a motor and be a fisherman. That boatload had the potential probably to kill tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of Americans. So don't you tell me that poor Juan, who made a decision to get into a boat that he knew was full of illicit drugs with the terrorists and take it to the United States or one of the islands where they offload it, transship it, and ultimately makes its way to Europe or the US. And here it is, Regina Garcia Cano from the Associated Press telling the sad story of this Venezuelan fisherman. It's called Blatant Naked Propaganda. And we've seen this over and over. The illegal immigrants. You had a guy who's, the Maryland father who finally was deported, who was a Trenderagua member or MS-13 member, whatever it was. He's a gang member. He was transporting illegals, trafficking people, and other things. And, you had a U.S. Senator, Democrat, went down to try and free him from prison and made a big deal about it. He was an illegal immigrant. Here illegally, that's enough to deport him. Secondly, he was a criminal, and illegal criminal aliens should not be allowed to stay in our country. So This is the kind of stuff you see again and again. Siding with criminals, siding with dangerous, deadly people who do not mean us well coming to our country. But here you have propaganda at its best, trying to come up with a story that paints this poor fisherman as the victim, not the thousands of people poisoned by fentanyl. So it's really just an amazing thing. Once in a while, the suppress Herald, they let through one or two letters to the editor or editorials. And amazingly, in this paper today, Sunday, November 9th, we probably should get a plaque, put it on the wall to commemorate a conservative letter to the editor editorial by a college student from Bowdoin College. Now, isn't this ironic? Bowdoin College, where Mamdani, the new Democratic Socialist Communist mayor elect of New York City, graduated from Bowdoin College with a degree in African studies. Isn't that great? The guy who's going to run a hundreds of billions of dollar budgeted New York City with millions and millions of people and hundreds of thousands of employees and trash problems and all sorts of problems, crime problems, police problems, school problems. That's the guy who's going to fix it, is the guy from Bowdoin College who's got a degree in, you guessed it, African studies. Beautiful. So here's a long editorial by Nelson Dorsey III as a student at Bowdoin College, and basically makes the case that the Democrats have lost their way, and this whole shutdown and the way they are managing their thing, their caucus in Washington, D.C. is broken, and they've lost their way, and that they are not helpful to the middle class or the people in this country. Very well written, very positive that you have somebody at a place like Bowdoin College that actually was not afraid to speak his mind. Good for him. He's also on the football team and is the founder of the Bowdoin Christian Athletes. So, hats off. This is the turn that is going to happen because common sense is popping up its pretty head. But that's the kind of thing you're going to get, and once in a while something breaks through. Meanwhile, this main Sunday Suppress Herald, the front page, this is what is most important to them on the front page, on transgender students. More Maine school districts aligning with Trump policy, defying state law. Richmond recently joined more than a half dozen districts opting to adhere to the president's executive order, even as it conflicts with Maine's Human Rights Act, and setting the stage for a prolonged legal challenge. I don't think it's going to be prolonged at all. I think the Supreme Court is going to say, no, the Title IX federal law protects girls and women in sports, period. And they're going to come down on the side of girls and women are girls and women, and boys and men should not be playing with girls and women. And that's the end of it, because that is the end of it. Drop the mic. It's that simple. So we're going to get back to sanity. And hopefully, the people that need mental health support will get back to sanity as well. Those that haven't destroyed their bodies and minds, and it's too late already. So that's top of the page on the Sunday paper. Transgender, they're losing the battle, they're losing the war, and they're going to give it one last try. It's pretty pitiful. So there you have it. We're going to keep it short today, but keep in mind, this is just an example of exactly what's happening across the entire United States and probably Canada and Europe as well. We have this mainstream, call it, a lot of people refer to it as lamestream media that have lost all semblance of being actual media, press, and reporting. There are no more real reporters doing real journalism. It's all propaganda. And as I've said before, politics is local, and so is propaganda. And we're going to keep exposing this, and there's just no end to it. It's not like I've had people that comment on the podcast and they've asked, where do you get your material? And I'm like, I just open the paper every day, every week. The suppressed Herald can't help themselves. They are liberals. They are activists. They are not journalists. They are propagandists. And they're owned by, isn't this ironic, oligarchs? Claude Omidyar, Bill Gates, and good old George Soros, now Alex Soros, Tides Foundation. Their foundations have bought local newspapers across the country, put it under an umbrella, the National Distrust for Local News. We have here Maine Distrust for Local News that owns a significant majority of all of the papers in Maine, and all under one editorial roof and under one ideological propaganda operation. That's what we have in the media. And it's being exposed. And very slowly, they're losing their grip, they're losing their minds because common sense is prevailing. And I think that it's going to be continuous, and we are really gaining ground on reality versus the propaganda dystopia that they're trying to paint, constantly telling us not to believe our lying eyes. Look around you, you see the mess that everything in the states has been made of, and it's just crazy. So with that, we're going to wrap up here. It's exciting times. It's going to get more exciting. Word has it that some of the legal issues that the deep state was putting on to Trump and others coming to a head. And hopefully the Democrats who own the shutdown are also going to be having those eggs come home to roost, or those chickens come home to roost, on exactly what they've done with this stupid shutdown. We will talk more about healthcare and what their lies are with healthcare on our next podcast. I'm going to dive into it in a little more detail. So look forward to chatting then. And with that, thanks for tuning in. Please share, please follow. And if you like what we're chatting about, let me know and share it with friends, family, and anybody you can. We appreciate it.